Wike go. Yeah, Rishio, I don't follow Wike go. If you see my mama, tell her, I don't follow Wike go. If you see my mama, tell her, I don't follow Wike go.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you're watching from at this time. Welcome back to the Pivot Report. Today, we will be taking a deep look at the consequences of Wike, Fubara, and Nigerians' unbroken cycle of political godfatherism. We will break it all down with context, facts, and historical perspective. Stay tuned, don't skip, because this is a conversation every Nigerian should hear. They said he was loyal. They said he would follow instructions. They said he owned everything to one man. Now, here's a thing about power. It doesn't come with a loyalty chip installed. The moment you hand someone a governorship, you hand them estates, courts, commissioners, police, budget authority, and something else. Something that doesn't show up in any official handover document. You hand them options. And Rivers State in 2023 is where Nigeria got reminded loudly of what happens when a man starts exploring his options. But here is the question I want you sitting with from this very first second of this video. Was this a betrayal, or was this always going to happen? Because if you know your Nigerian political history, and after today you will, this story isn't new. The name changes, the state changes, the crisis stays. All right, let's set the scene. 2023, Rivers State gubernatorial election, and the man who dominated that election before the ballots were even printed was Nyesom Wike. Wike wasn't on the ballot. He served his 2 terms as governor. But Wike being off the ballot didn't mean Wike was out of the game, not even slightly. See, in Nigerian politics, there is a move that's almost as old as the Republic itself. A powerful man, one who has built the structures, cultivated the loyalties, controlled the party machinery, decides that when he leaves office, his exit is managed. He picks the next person, he presents the next person, he installed the next person. That person was Similai Fubara, a technocrat, a financial administrator, competent, yes, but politically, he was a relatively new face on that level. And Wike, who by this point had become federal minister of the FCT, have strong opinion about how Rivers State should continue to be run. Right now, you're watching a story that has played out across Nigeria for decades. If you want to understand it fully, smash that like button so this analysis reaches more people who need to see it. Here is what most people mix in the reporting. Fubara's winning the governorship wasn't the end of the political negotiation. It was the beginning of a new one. Because here is the uncomfortable reality that both sides understood very differently. Wike believed he had made an investment, and investments have expected returns. Fubara believed he had won an election, and elections in theory produce mandates. Those two beliefs, they are not compatible. And when incompatible beliefs meet real power, what you get is exactly what Rivers State got, a political crisis that cracked the state wide open. The River House of Assembly fractures, commissioners started choosing sides, legal filings spy, accusations fly, and the federal government sitting in Abuja watching has to decide whether to intervene and how. Think about that for a second. A state that produces billions in oil revenue, a state that feeds into the national economy, and it spends much consuming itself, not over policy, not over development strategy, but over the questions of who really controls it. Now, here is where it gets interesting. because the Wike Fubara story, as dramatic as it is actually a surface reading of a much bigger structural question. What does a politician actually own the person who brought them to power? In a perfect world of your political science teacher's version, the answer is simple. A politician owns their loyalty to the people who voted for them. Full stop. But in the real world, in the world where elections cost money, where party structures require cultivation, where grassroots mobilization doesn't happen by itself, there is a darker answer underneath that clean one. But here is my honest framing. Political godfathers doesn't just donate money, they lend credibility, networks, machineries, and sometimes protection. And when that is what got you across the line, the godfather's expectations of loyalty isn't irrational. It is just incompatible with democratic governance. That tension between logic of political patronage and the logic of constitutional mandate is the real debate underneath every single Nigerian godfatherism story. And it is not going away, not soon. To understand why this argument feels so familiar, we need to go back 2 decades ago. In 2003, Chris Ngige was elected governor of Anambra State, and standing behind that victory very visibly was one man, Chris Uba, a political entrepreneur who had organized, financed, and delivered the election machinery that made Ngige's wins possible. What Uba expected in return? Assets, influence, the kind of continued relationship that says, yes, you are the governor, but we make decisions together. What Ngige delivered? Something quite different. The rupture was spectacular. In 2004, Ngige was, and I want you to really sit with this, briefly abducted. There was a document, a forced resignation letter that Ngige later disavowed. It reads like a political thriller, except it actually happened in a broad daylight in Nigerian's democracy. Now, here is where the story changes. The court eventually sided with Ngige, but by then the damage was done. Governance had stalled. The state had spent years consuming itself, and the lesson, nobody seems to learn it. Oyo State, 2006. A few years later, Oyo State offered a case study in what happens when the governor has independent means and therefore independent will. Rashidi Ladoja wasn't broke when he came to power. He didn't need Adedibu's money the way some governors did, and that changed the dynamics entirely. Adedibu, the strong man of Ibadan, a man who had defined Oyo politics for decades, expected the customary deference, the regular consultations, the budget discussions that went through him. Ladoja said no repeatedly, and then in 2006, Ladoja was impeached, a legislative maneuver that, when examined by the courts, was found to be unconstitutional and overturned. But the pattern was already complete. Godfather investments, Godfather demands, Godfather resists institutions become weapons. Courts sort it out. Eventually, state suffers, always. Before we go deeper into the pattern, drop a comment below. Which Nigerian states do you think has suffered most from Godfather politics? The debate in the comment is always better than the video itself. Let's be honest, in both cases, Ngige and Ladoja, Nigeria's judiciary did eventually hold the line. The court drew the boundary, but the political damage was already done. Governance at stalled, resources has been diverted, and the lesson, if anyone was observing it, seems to evaporate into the next election cycle. So, what is the pattern? Because there is one, and it is important. Nigerian elections don't end power struggles, they reformat them. Here are 4 notable patterns in Nigerian polity. Pattern 1. The alliance trap. During campaigns, political alliances aren't optional. They are survival tools. Nobody built election machinery alone. But here's the problem. What the Godfather treats as a long-term investment, the governor starts treating, once in office, as a debt he didn't voluntarily sign for. The moment the ballots are counted, both parties are reading from different contracts. Pattern 2. Institutional capture. When the political tensions escalate, institutions stop being referees and start becoming weapons. Assemblies splits along factional lines. Commissioners resign or get reshuffled based on loyalty, not performance. Courts get petitioned at every turn. What should be stabilizing forces in a democracy become theaters of political war. Pattern 3. The loyalty fracture. Who does an elected leader actually owe loyalty to after winning? This is the fracture line. Godfather says, loyalty flows upward to those who made your victory possible. Democrat says, loyalty flows downward to the people who put their thumb on the ballot. Most people don't realize this. Both sides believe they are right, and that is exactly what makes this conflict so combustible. Pattern 4. The personalization trap. When political systems are built around powerful personalities rather than independent institutions, every subsection becomes a crisis. Because the institution, the party, the assembly, the governorship itself only has weight through the strong man behind it. Remove the personality and there is no infrastructure left. Nigeria is not alone in this. Across post-colonial Africa, from Kenya to Cameroon, political succession remains one of the most dangerous moments in a democracy's calendar, because it is the moment the informal power arrangement meets the formal constitutional framework, and one of them has to yield. So, what is the reverse crisis really telling us? On the surface, it looks like a personal feud, Wike versus Fubara, former governor versus current governor, bruised ego meeting emerging ambition. But look deeper, and you see something more significant. A democracy testing the tensile strength of its own institutions. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Political godfatherism does not flourish where institutions are strong. It flourishes where they are hollow, where party structures are transactional rather than ideological, where state assembly respond to political patrons more than to constitutional mandates, where the judiciary can be leaned on, delayed, or selective weaponized. Wike did not invent this system. Adedibu did not invent it either. They both mastered an existing architecture, one built gradually across decades of military interruption, transactional elite politics, and the slow erosion of institutional independence. The question worth asking is not, why does Wike still want influence? This is the obvious question. The real question is, why does the system allow it? Because the system allowing it is a choice. It is a choice made every time an assembly votes along patron lines instead of constitutional ones. Every time a party structure gives one man veto power over who can run. Every time a court ruling comes too late to prevent the damage. If you're a young politician watching this, and there are many of you, here is what history is trying to teach you. Take note of these lessons from the feud between Wike and Fubara. Because on this channel, we don't just analyze, we also extract lessons that can forestall future occurrence. Lesson 1. Never mistake the vehicle for the destination. Political alliances are tools for arriving in office. They are not governing mandates. The people who helped you campaign are not co-governors. The transition from campaign mode to governance mode is one of the most important moves a leader makes, and the ones who get it wrong often confuse the two indefinitely. Lesson 2. Institutional independence is not disloyalty. A governor who cannot make a cabinet decision without a phone call to Abuja is not governing. He is executing instructions. Instructional independence is making decisions grounded in your mandate rather than your godfather's preference. It is not disloyalty, it is governance. The difference matters enormously. Lesson 3. Your debt shifts the moment you take the oath. The moment you are sworn in, your primary obligation shifts. It shifts from those who financed the campaign to those who trusted you with their schools, their hospitals, their infrastructure, their future. That shift is not optional, it is constitutional. And the leaders who forget it are the ones history judge most harshly. Lesson 4. Document everything. Verbal agreement in Nigerian politics has a very short lifespan. If someone helped you get elected and there are exceptions attached to that help, get clarity up front, in writing if possible. Ambiguity is the breeding ground for the kind of disputes we are watching play out in Rivers State today. Lesson 5. The system you inherit is not the system you have to keep. Every pattern we discuss today, the alliance trap, institutional capture, the loyalty fracture, these are patterns, not law of nature. They can be disrupted. The leaders who disrupt them are the ones who leave legacies. The one who perpetuates them are case studies in political documentaries. Your choice entirely. History is ruthless. It does not remember the Godfather. It remembers the leader who either rose above the system or becomes its instrument. So, where does this end? Let me be clear. I am not predicting the future, but based on the patterns we've identified, there are 3 realistic scenarios playing out simultaneously. Scenario 1, the calculated peace. Both camps negotiate a political settlement behind closed doors. Wike retains influence within defined limits, perhaps over certain projects, certain appointments, and Fubara governs with reduced interference. Rivers State returned to something resembling normalcy, not because the system healed, but because 2 powerful men found a temporary truce they could both live with. This is the most likely short-term outcome, but it doesn't solve the structural problem. It just defers it. However, this is likely overtaken by event because Fubara has already, declared that he will not be running for the second term in office as agreed. Scenario 2, the legal resolution. Court progressively draw clearer constitutional boundaries around executive authority. The political conflict continues, both channels itself through institutional processes, rulings, appeals, legislative realignment. Nigerian's judiciary gets another stress text. The question is whether it passes this one with more credibility than it sometimes has in the past. Scenario 3, the prolonged impasse. Neither side fully yields. The River House of Assembly remains factionally divided. Governance drags, development slows. Rivers State, one of Nigeria's most resource-rich states, a state that could be a model for others, spend another political cycle consuming itself instead of building itself. In my opinion, this is likely where they are right now. Well, which scenario unfolds depends not just on Wike and Fubara, but on every institution in between. Will they function or will they fold? History does not repeat itself, but it leaves patterns carved so deeply into the political landscape that each generation must make a choice: inherit them or dismantle them. From Ngige to Ladoja to Fubara, Nigerian democracy keeps returning to the same intersection. Where does a godfather's authority end and a people's mandate begins? The answer has never been simple, but the asking of it openly, honestly, and repeatedly is itself a form of democratic progress, because the alternative is silence, and silence is how these patterns survive. Because to understand today's politics, you must understand its history. This is the Pivot Report, where politics meets history. If you found value in this analysis, then subscribe, share it with someone who thinks they already understand Nigerian politics, and drop your scenario below. Which of those three outcomes do you think play out in Rivers State? Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Till then, bye.